How do you leave the one island facility built to be impossible to leave? Alcatraz sits alone in San Francisco Bay, a mile and a half from the mainland, surrounded by water so cold and currents so violent that for decades the U.S. government believed it didn't need walls high enough to hold anyone in. The bay itself was the barrier. Before it became a federal facility in 1933, the island had already served as a military fort and later a military holding site since the 1850s. But once the Department of Justice took it over, Alcatraz became something else entirely. The place they sent the men no other facility could manage. Al Capone spent time here. So did George Machine Gun Kelly. Over its nearly 3 decades in operation, around 36 men attempted to leave Alcatraz across 14 separate attempts. Every single one of them was either brought back or lost. Not one had ever truly gotten away. That track record is exactly why, in 1962, the facility believed it had nothing left to worry about. It was wrong. The plan belonged, at least in part, to a man named Frank Morris. Morris grew up bouncing through the foster system, in trouble from a young age, but somewhere along the way, someone tested his intelligence and found it was extraordinarily high. He used that intelligence to leave multiple facilities before Alcatraz. In fact, that's exactly why he ended up there. Officials believed Alcatraz was the one place capable enough to hold him. Waiting for him were 2 brothers, Clarence and John Anglin, raised on a farm in Georgia, found guilty on a string of financial theft charges, and fiercely loyal to one another. They'd crossed paths with Morris at earlier facilities, and by chance, all 3 ended up at Alcatraz together, assigned to neighboring living quarters in one of the housing units. A 4th man, Alan West, helped originate much of the plan alongside them. West would later become the FBI's best source on exactly how it all worked, because on the night it mattered most, his own route out wasn't ready in time, and he was left behind. The plan the 4 of them built took months. It started with something almost accidental. The concrete around the ventilation grates at the back of their quarters had quietly corroded from decades of salt air. It was weaker than anyone realized. Using metal utensils shaped against the concrete floor and later a homemade tool improvised from a household motor, they began widening the openings night after night, timing the noise of their work to the facility's scheduled music hour, so the sound disappeared into an accordion playing nearby. Each night, they hid the growing gap behind a fake cardboard cover, painted to match the wall so closely that staff members checked it daily without noticing a thing. Behind those openings, above their own housing unit, they built a hidden workspace, a space no staff member ever found, where they spent months secretly putting together the tools they'd need. They built lifelike head models to leave behind in their beds: soap, toilet paper, skin tone paint taken from art supplies, and real human hair swept up from the floor of the on-site barbershop. Close enough, in dim light, to fool a staff member doing a quick nightly head count. And they built a raft, a full-sized raft, along with flotation vests sewn and glued together from more than 50 raincoats, the seams sealed using heat borrowed from nearby steam pipes. On the night of June 11th, 1962, they made their move. One by one, after lights out, the 3 men slipped through their widened openings into a shared utility corridor. They climbed pipes up to the roof of their housing unit. They descended an exterior pipe roughly 50 feet down to the ground. Under cover of darkness, they cut through the barbed perimeter fence. They scrambled down the rocky embankment to the water's edge. And then they launched their raft into the freezing black water of the bay, aiming for Angel Island, roughly 2 miles away, hidden by night and fog. They were never seen again. The next morning, staff doing the routine head count found the head models instead of the men. The island went into a full closure. Search boats and helicopters swept the bay within hours. Days later, searchers found a makeshift paddle floating in the water. Shortly after that, scraps of raincoat material washed up, but that was it. No remains. No further trace. Nothing that could prove, one way or another, what had actually happened to them out on that water. The FBI investigated for 17 years. They interviewed family members. They chased down sighting reports from across the country, none of which ever held up. And in 1979, they officially closed the case, concluding that the men had most likely drowned. The currents were too strong, the water too cold, the swim too far. But even in closing the file, the FBI admitted something important. No proof of death was ever found. Not then, not since. And then, in 2013, more than 50 years after the night they vanished, a letter arrived at a San Francisco police station. It claimed to be written by John Anglin himself. It said that all three men had survived that night, barely. It said Clarence had passed away in 2011 and Morris in 2008. And it offered a trade. John Anglin would come forward, but only if he could get medical treatment for an illness he claimed to be facing. The FBI's forensic lab examined the letter for fingerprints, for DNA, for anything in the handwriting that could confirm or deny it. The results came back inconclusive, not fake, not verified, just unresolved. To this day, the Anglin family maintains their relatives survived. Investigators and authors have chased leads for decades. Alleged photographs, claimed sightings in South America. Family members who say they know more than they've ever told authorities. The U.S. Marshals Service technically still keeps the case open, still willing to follow any credible new lead that comes in. More than 60 years later, no remains have ever been recovered. No confirmed sighting has ever held up. And the fate of Frank Morris, Clarence Anglin, and John Anglin remains one of the only truly unsolved mysteries in American history, a story that even now splits investigators into two camps, those who believe the bay took them that night, and those who believe three men actually beat the rock. We may never know which one is true. Subscribe for more unsolved mysteries.